Welcome everybody to the latest edition of the Inside Track podcast. I've got two fabulous guests with me today, Decombel and Dr. Stuart Grice. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Ryan. Very well.
Awesome. Well, we're it's an unusual podcast today because we don't usually get the science guys on, which is awesome for me. I really enjoy these types of podcasts. Probably the best place to start, then, I don't know who wants to go first, is just to give a quick rundown who you guys are, what's your sort of background, where you come from.
Sure, yeah. Shall I kick off, Ryan? Just to we're obviously here representing Fiona today. I'm the CEO of the company. Stuart is my Chief Science Officer. We're both co-founders of the company. We've both been in there since the start. So,
Awesome.
in terms of my background, I'm a geneticist by training. So I did my PhD in genetics more
Wow.
years ago than I care to remember now. So I'm also a doctor actually, which is nice to know. Yeah, we've been sort of, I guess I'm more involved now with the administrative side of the company in terms of the running, the strategy,
Yeah.
what we're doing with the technology that we've built from back in the early days, which we could perhaps chat a bit more about in a
Absolutely.
moment. But I'll let Stuart introduce himself first.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm obviously Sam's as a co-founder. My background and continues to be my background in the company is the science. So I did a PhD at Oxford and then was an academic there for about 15 years, even though I still have a few
Wow.
contact points. I concentrated on, I'm sort of a geneticist or something called functional genomics, so understanding how the genome impacts health and who we are. But specific specializations in neuromuscular disease and neuroscience as well. So a lot of diseases that affect how the muscles function, also how the brain functions. So towards the end, I was looking at neurodegeneration and dementia.
And just out of interest, how long's Fitness Gene's been around? What's the
July the
what made
1st,
you?
2013.
So 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, just over 12 years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys must be at the forefront of this developing, because I remember I worked for a company called Fitness Space probably 5-10 years ago, and we used to sell DNA packs. Almost sounds really bad, but almost as a gimmick, a sales pitch at the start. So it was part of the joining fee. You got the DNA pack and you got information, but it was amazing for us. But at the time, it wasn't as robust in terms of the testing as it probably is now. I know you guys do amazing stuff now. So what made you guys go, okay, that's the way we're going to go. We're going to try and focus this into the sort of fitness side.
You want me to go, Sam, or do you want to go?
Uh, Go on, Stu, you're obviously keen.
Yeah, no, yeah. So you have to. So it's obviously a developing industry, and it will continue to develop. We're finding out new things every day. For me, I'm interested in genetics and health. We had another couple of co-founders. One who's a personal trainer, also a
Right.
clinician. Another guy who was involved in nutraceuticals and nutrition, Sam and myself. So the idea actually come with all the different expertise sets where actually we were looking at genetic information that actually would be useful for people to adapt their training. That came from Dan, who was the original CEO of the company, and he was really interested in how he could use this information to help personally himself, but then his clients, because he also run a personal training business at the same time. I come very much from the background of actually genetics and also the interaction of your lifestyle and everything else. How does this impact long-term health? And of course today we're talking about the fitness industry, but really and where Fitness Gene's trajectory is how do we use fitness and our knowledge of our health risks to live longer lives? So
And I
that's
think that, to be fair, I think that's where the fitness industry is going. Because whereas before it's very much about training, being fitter, looking better, and so on, the shift is very much more now wellness. That's a huge drive in the industry now. So I think people are a lot more aware that actually exercising, being healthy gives them longevity. And obviously the more information they have with that, and people are seeking out more information now. Whereas before they used to turn up at a gym and the instructor give them what they need to do, and that's what they did. Now I think with the access to information, people are seeking that out a lot more and going, okay, how can I impact what I'm doing? And it's not just now about the training. There's so much more involved in that health and well-being.
sure.
Yeah, I think
Sam, do you want to?
that's, yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, Ryan, I think that people are more aware now of the tools that they have at their disposal in terms of understanding how these things impact them personally. So there's a huge amount of sort of different biometric tools that we have access to. We've got blood testing data, and genetic testing is another part of that arsenal in terms of understanding how you individually react and how you track in terms of those sorts of metrics, so that you can understand the impact that particular health interventions will have on you. Because ultimately there's so many things out there that you could do from a health perspective. I mean, we've never had more information available to us across the internet in terms of what is good for our health. As you've said there, we know that physical activity is one of the biggest modifiers of health, of disease risk, and that we should be doing more of it. But also thinking about other factors around diets, around lifestyle and behaviors that people can exhibit or people can follow, that can really make a big difference in terms of someone's likelihood of suffering a sort of longevity limiting, shall we say, disease, which is the thing that particularly in the Western world is what most people will suffer in their later years, and what we're trying to reverse through that longevity trend, I think.
What it's an interesting point you say that, because one of the big moves that we see now is it's not about living longer, it's about living better for longer, and I think that's where it comes into it. Let's be honest, our kids will probably live to 100 and well beyond, by the time they get there. And but you don't want the last 30 years to be sat in an armchair watching TV. You almost want to be that healthy person, and the more information we have about that, I mean, you guys must see some incredible data and so, information in terms of, if you do this, you can increase your lifespan by X, Y, and Z. So and being able to then bring that to the general community rather than the science geeks and the obviously the people that understand it. I think that's the challenge, isn't it? It's sort of going, well, this is the science. I mean, you guys really know your stuff. I don't, and so it's one of those things to sort of go, actually, how do we take that amazing information and give it to the general population so they can make improvements?
No,
Yeah,
sure.
you've hit the nail on the head there, Ryan. And this is something we discovered back in the early days when we started the company. I think because we all had a scientific sort of foundation, we felt that we needed to justify what we were delivering to people. It was very scientific. We delivered all of the citations, all of the papers, the references behind it. And people came back to us and went, look, this is really interesting and all, but you've obviously got a really clever team with lots of clever people. Can you just tell us what to do? Like, how do I use this information? What do I do with it? And I think that was the light bulb moment for us. Just as you said, people don't necessarily need to understand the mechanisms behind the research that is being presented. They just want to know, okay, show me where my risks are and then tell me what to do about them. And it's as simple as that. And that's part of what we've sort of built out in the company over the past 5 years in particular. Rethought our strategy in terms of how we deliver the information to people. So providing more support through not just being able to buy the test direct to consumer as we sort of traditionally sold it. You can still go on our website, you can purchase a test and you can get access to all that information yourself today. But now you can also work with personal trainers who can help you understand how to use that information as well. And we've developed training courses for personal trainers that can upskill them in having that background understanding, as you said, so they can have the conversations with their clients and deliver the information to them in a way that's understandable to the clients.
Yeah, because I can imagine there's a lot of big words in what you guys do. Just a normal doctor has a lot of them, let alone you scientists. So it's trying to almost dumb it down for us in the sense of going, okay, here's the data, this is what it does, and this is how you need to improve. Now, just flipping back in terms of what you guys do. In terms of the DNA testing, how does that work? How do you guys interpret that data? Because I can imagine, how does it work? I mean, is it blood tests and then you guys interpret what comes in? How does
Sure.
it look for you guys?
Yeah, so our system, which I'll plug our Europe patent here. We've got a system. So we're a genetic testing company, but actually the system we use takes genetic data, blood data, lifestyle data. So of course you need a holistic understanding of the individual. So in terms of the genetic test, it's actually a spit test, so it's non-invasive, which is quite cool. But obviously DNA is in all, sorry, the majority of cells in our body, and Generally, it doesn't change. Of course, you can have these what we call somatic mutations where you get different changes, and that's where cancer often arises from. But generally, understanding your genetics, you can take it from any cell in the body, and it will come from the cheek cells and some of the immune cells when you spit. We then analyze 600,000 genetic variants.
Wow.
Lots. And all of these genetic variants cover different domains of health: cardiovascular health, brain health, musculoskeletal health, then more cellular properties, so inflammatory processes in the cell, oxidative stress processes in the cell, and then obviously the metabolic components. So this is where you've got your blood sugar, your cholesterol, all these other components. So you have all these genetic variants that increase or decrease the likelihood of risks, but also potentially the levels of certain biomarkers in the cell. So just extrapolate it down to something very simple in terms of weight training or going to the gym. So there's one genetic variant called alpha-actinin 3 that if you have a mutation, you do not produce the protein. So what does that mean? Actually, the structure of the muscle is a lot more liable to stress.
Right.
This means that actually for those individuals, you should probably do higher volume, concentrate on reps, and not do explosive power stuff in the gym. That's just one little component. Now we have variants that look at how people think of lactate as the bad molecule, but lactate is actually an energetic molecule. You reshuttle it back into your cells and you use it for energy when doing exercise. We have mutations in receptors that actually reduce the amount of uptake, so therefore you get increased lactate buildup, which then means potentially doing lots of volume is less beneficial for you.
I was going to say that probably indicates why some people are better at endurance activities versus the strength and power ones.
Exactly. So you will find that these variants coalesce if you've got the advantageous one, or I wouldn't like say disadvantageous one, because actually biology is more about trade-offs than bad and good a lot of the time. So you'll find an enrichment of the genes associated with power, hypertrophy in power athletes, the ones associated with improved vascular tone, the ability to be vascular responsive, mitochondrial biogenesis, so the use of oxidative energy processes. You'll find these enriched in people who are more likely or better at endurance athletics. Then, of course, you can take this information and go, okay, well, what's the best way to structure the modalities? You also have that's talking about single genes, but actually a lot of genetics is based on what you call polygenetic scores or polygenic scores, where you take multiple variants that lean you one way to the other, and then we can bucket people into different categories. And this has been seen in actually in VO2 max trainability. Some people do not respond to the traditional VO2 max training protocols, so kind of like fartlek stuff and everything else. So those people, you actually have to think about some of the lactol threshold training or other processes, because they're more likely to respond to those. So all of a sudden you've got these ideas. So again, with lactate, think about if you've got increased lactate, supplementing with beta alanine may be more important for those individuals. You can start to go, okay, well, where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? And how then do you organize your training program? But actually all the things we've been talking about in terms of muscular strength, cardiovascular strength, everything else, these are all also linked to risks of chronic diseases and impacts on your health span. So even though we actually very much started in the gym market, and you're absolutely right, that the gym itself is filling the gap that primary care isn't filling in both the UK and the US at the moment. And we're really understanding how many of these variants can link you to risks of inflammatory conditions, which ultimately then lead to impacts on brain health, cardiovascular health, and metabolic health, increased risk of type 2 diabetes. But ultimately, you think about when you start to get your blood markers through, you can start to see your blood glucose is going up. Actually, are there genetic drivers of that? With cardiovascular disease, there's some very penetrant genetic variants. So penetrant means they have a very big impact. You'll hear Peter Attia talk about lipoprotein A. That's those levels, and that increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, is highly genetic. The genetic variants that we can look at and go, okay, you have that variant. Actually, the basic lifestyle interventions are not probably going to be the things you need to do. So actually, at certain points, there may be clinical triage that needs to happen. So understanding all these strengths and weaknesses gives us the ability to, okay, in terms of your long-term health, what is your biggest priority? So we've actually just built within our direct to consumer site now, we've just built something we've called Basil, which is the biological assessment system for improved longevity. Doffed cap to the herb, which is associated with the Mediterranean diet. Also, Basil is the name of the guy that painted Dorian Gray's portrait. So there's a bit of a sort of a literature link there as well. Let's not dig into the realities of that book. But so what it does is it ranks where we feel you need to focus first. Is it cardiovascular health? Is it metabolic health? Is it musculoskeletal? Is it brain? Is it to do with your organ health? So the gut or your liver? And we can go, okay, well, these are your number one targets based on your genetic and non-genetic data. Then we go, and the old product was very much, here's 185 traits based on different areas of your biology, and for each result we gave you a list of recommendations and actions. Now what we do is, okay, out of all the actions in the system, here's your top 3 supplements, here's your top 3 foods, this is your top 3 modalities, here's your top 3 behaviors. If you think about cognitive health, things like volunteering, things like sort of playing musical instruments, learning new language, actually really important for people that may have episodic memory and cognitive issues later down the line, which of course ultimately are linked to conditions like dementia. So you really start to go, actually, biologically, this is where I need to target my efforts. And also, the economics of it, we all have limited means apart from the Brian Johnsons of this world. So we need to really understand.
I actually think he looks that much better for all of his millions. I mean, he might feel better, he might feel younger, and his scores may show that he's. But physically, when you look at him, he doesn't look any better. I don't know whether
I
that's
remember
a good thing or not.
I think Chris Williamson, is it, the podcast guy? I remember him saying he's the best longevity experiments there is, and I would say as a scientist, it's the worst longevity experiment there is. There's one guy that's done everything, so you don't know which things are working and actually which things can have a detrimental effect. And you see this with certain longevity supplements at the moment. They're putting ingredients in that in certain people can actually be increasing liver problems. So a lot of the antioxidants, I have something called Gilbert's syndrome, which is positive in one sense because it raises my bilirubin levels, and bilirubin is a fantastic antioxidant, so it can reduce inflammation. So having Gilbert's syndrome is linked to slightly longer longevity. However, if I start filling myself with curcumin and quercetin and all your sort of green tea sort of antioxidants, actually the same molecule that metabolizes those is what you metabolizes paracetamol. It can be metabolized in certain components in statins for people who are older and stuff. I'm not on statins, gladly. And so therefore, actually, what is deemed to be in a population sense a beneficial molecule, actually on an individual sense can have a negative effect. So it's really so you've got these massive supplements marketed by famous footballers, and they are good in a population sense, but on an individual sense may not necessarily be that good.
Yeah, so some individuals may be better off with the actual individual product rather than one that just lumps it all together so they can leave out what they don't need.
Yeah. And that's actually what we've done in the system. We've actually ranked the individual ingredients. Now, over time, of course, you can start to think about how you can create blends, formulations, but you've got to create many formulations to deal with these issues where certain supplements may have negative effects. Some people we look at one of the part of organ health is gut inflammation. Certain things shouldn't be taken with people with an increased risk of gut inflammation and then Crohn's. There's other factors. So niacin's one, and they have it in lower doses, but niacin is very good for reducing blood triglycerides and cholesterol, but the genetic variants associated with blood spiking, which actually can create a form of diabetes without the obvious raise in blood glucose, and niacin can exacerbate that spiking. And I think it's in higher doses. I think it's 1,000 milligrams. So again, you've got the personalization is so important. Otherwise, a lot of the time you're just throwing your money away.
But the great thing is 15 years ago, this wasn't available. Now you can do it and actually get something that says, actually, this is where you need to focus if you want to feel better, look better. Now, just out of interest, do you guys ever, and you might not do this, but do you guys have any evidence to sort of go, okay, this person's taken our advice, they've changed their training around from strength to more cardio and whatever, and the improvement in results? Or is that difficult to generate?
It's in terms of a holistic system, it's very difficult. So we have to focus on. So we published a paper looking at a genetic variant associated with increased body mass. So if you look in multiple populations in multiple age groups, in males and females, if you have this FTO variant, it increases your risk of body fat. And if you look at a population, these people have a number of kilograms more weight. In our population, we actually showed no genetic correlation because we were targeting the advice to the genetics. We also work with the UK government and Loughborough University, where we took people through our process and we looked at in the people with raised blood measures, so cholesterol and blood glucose. We looked at activity, amount of activity. We looked at body composition. We looked at for the people that did DEXA scans. We looked at a lean muscle mass, and we showed improvements, significant improvements.
It is quite amazing, and so. If somebody came bought your product, how does it? Obviously, they take their swab, and then what do they get at the end of it in terms of obviously they get all their markers, and then effectively they get an advice sheet to say try this.
Sam, do you want to
go? Yeah, sure. It depends on which service you use, Ryan. So for our direct consumer customers, our B2C customers that go on our website, buy our kits, they get access to an online member portal. And that effectively, as you said, it lets them browse all of their reports, over 180 of them. They're split into different categories, so they can kind of go into categories of interest. So as we were saying before, weight loss, muscle building, endurance, sleep, heart health, blood sugar health. So you can sort of browse through the reports at your leisure, and the reports are broken down with obviously what this means from a physiological perspective, your results, what your results specifically means for the band that you fall into, and then the key bit, of course, is the actionability. So what should I do about it in the context of my individual results? And you can save results. You can see which are your higher priority reports within there and save actions related to your higher priority reports. With our gym partners, they have control over the delivery of information to the end client. So they're very often working with a client with a particular goal in mind, and they can therefore tailor the information share with the client to really focus in on what it is that the client's trying to achieve, and also taking their own expertise in terms of, for somebody with this goal and with this particular physiological profile, these are the training parameters that I will design in. So they can use our B2B portal, which they have access to with all of their client data on, to generate reports that they can share with their clients, but they can pick which reports they share. So they might only choose to share 5 or 6 kind of key reports. They might choose to deliver the information on a continual basis, really helps with client retention, delivering the material over a course of time, over a sort of 12-week or extended plan. Alternatively, we've got templates on there as well. So we've got like a personal training template, 25 of the key reports related specifically to training parameters and things like the impact of caffeine on training and pre-workouts, that sort of thing. And they can just press 2 buttons, generate the report, and either email it or print a copy out for a client. So that's where we're at today. As Stuart sort of was talking about earlier, where we're moving to and what we're due to release this month to our direct consumer customers is Basel. So Basel is our next iteration. It's the lens that goes over the data. So now, instead of having to interrogate 180 reports yourself and figure out for yourself which are the most important, looking at the high priority ones, Basel is going to do that for you. So we've started off with supplements because it's nice and straightforward in terms of the organisation, and it's allowed us to do our team, Stuart, and our science and tech teams to build the algorithm that does that interrogation, pulls out the most important actions, looking at the sort of, how many times it's been recommended, what the level of confidence in terms of the research base is there behind it, what your individual priorities are around looking at physiologically. So we mentioned earlier, for me, it's inflammation. That is where I've got the highest sort of propensity from a genetic perspective of genetic factors, which put me at a higher risk than somebody within the general population. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's about working out for you as an individual, given all the things that you could target, where should we start? Where are your biggest risks? Where can we get the most bang for our buck in terms of mitigation? And we start there. So for some people, that might be brain health. Our next trait that we're releasing next week, which is quite an exciting one for us because we get asked about this a lot, is the ApoE4 variants, which is the one linked to Alzheimer's risk.
Okay, wow.
Now, around 25, this is a very prevalent trait. Around 25% of people are carriers of this trait. And I think between 2 to 3% will have 2 copies, if that's right, Stuart.
Yeah,
it has a very significant impact. And we know from sort of the Chris Hemsworth documentary, and it's become much more sort of in the public mind, that the fact that these are things to be aware of. But also there are things that we can do to mitigate them. And there's more and more research coming out all the time around that. And by knowing that this is a risk that you carry, you can therefore make the decision to prioritize those particular interventions that we know have the greatest effect against this particular disease. And obviously we all know that there's no promise, one, that if you carry this particular variant that you would develop the disease, although in this case, and again Stuart can talk in more detail, we know it's very tightly linked, so it's very likely if you live long enough you will develop the disease, but it is possible to mitigate and it is possible to delay onset. And that obviously is something, if I had that variant, if I was a carrier, and luckily for me I'm not, but I would want to know that, and I would want to be able to take
I'd certainly want to know
evasive action in terms of looking at the sorts of dietary interventions, the sorts of things that Stuart was talking about. I mean, Stuart, do you want to pipe in actually, because I know that this is a real sort of passion of yours?
Yeah, I think you've done a good job, to be honest with you. It's really, if you think about dementia, so when you have this variant, you have something what's called the molecular hallmark. So with dementia, you get these build-up of proteins in your nerves, your neurons in your brain, and it stops the nerve from functioning. So what you need to do is obviously reduce the amount of protein buildup, but also create cognitive reserve, your ability to deal with the odd neuron dying. So what you can do is promote neurogenesis, and exercise and other things can drive that. The analogy I use, if you think about, so we're in Oxfordshire, the M40 is just over there. There's a crash on the M40. To get to where you need to get to, you need side roads. What you need to be doing is supporting the neurons that are the side roads. So you see this sometimes in dementia patients where a region of the brain dies, but other regions actually take hold of that process. So therefore, clinically, they do not present with the disease. So the studies show that everyone with these variants has these buildups of this buildup of proteins, or these two particular proteins. However, they don't always present in the clinic with the typical symptoms and issues around dementia. So there is this space where you can, the earlier you target it, the better, of course. But there's this space where you can do as much as possible to either kick the can on it or even not see it at all, because you can support the development of the brain.
That's incredible. And just out of interest, it's because obviously we're doing a lot of this genetic stuff, and the fact that the West isn't a wholly white population anymore, it's very very mixed. Do you guys see a lot of the differences between the different races, different nationalities on the genetics, or is, say, an English population, a white English population, there's so many differences between that actually it's not much difference when you start putting in different nationalities as well?
Sure. Well, actually, you've linked on perfectly there, but I'll get to that point second. So absolutely, there's genetic diversity on the planet, and a lot of the genetic data is representative of Northern Europeans, white Caucasians. There is a deficit of understanding on particularly other populations, but we started to see a change in that. So if you think about a disease like take diabetes, for example, what you can see is you have different variants in different populations that confer risk, but the variants you'll find are in the proteins in the same process. So what you're just doing is the evolutionary processes where these variants have occurred in biological history. They are different, but you can understand them in terms of the same pathway, what's driving the disease.
Right.
Now, back to ApoE, and this is something I've been working on the last few days, is actually there's another variant that's actually protective of dementia. So you have the E4, E3, and E2. E2 is average risk, E4 is increased risk, E2 is decreased risk. But actually, the nature of that protection differs depending on ethnic background. So what we do in the system is go, are you from sort of a sub-Saharan African background? Are you Southeast Asian background? Are you? And then we can go, okay, well, we know your background and your genetics, and then we can give you particular advice. So for certain people, there's with African and some Asian populations, actually the protective effect is reduced. Therefore, that would then change the way we explain the trait to the individual. So there are several traits within our system that take ethnicity into account and either can't call the risks because we say this has only been done in a white Caucasian population, or modify the risk or use different variants. So lactase persistence, so lactose intolerance is one way you can get so what happens is you produce an enzyme to digest milk, the lactose in milk, and then historically, or in terms of evolution, then you stop producing that enzyme. Therefore, people become lactose intolerant. It was selected for persistence in Northern European populations, where actually we continue to produce it. That's why we can deal with milk better than certain other ethnic groups. But there are also populations in Africa that also have a different mutation that actually give them the same lactase persistence. So we look at two different separate genetic variations, but the outcome is still the same. But that's
because aren't many Asian populations, aren't they lactose intolerant? They don't have that genetic modification.
absolutely.
High frequency. Yeah, it's high frequency.
Yeah, also with alcohol dehydrogenase, because you think about it, so it's called the Asian flush because they actually don't process alcohol very well. So when they so then you get the toxic sort of metabolites of alcohol, and that increases their risk of certain cancers, I think prostate cancer and other cancers.
Oh, wow.
So again, there are population specific idiosyncrasies that we have to take into account.
It's quite interesting actually, because when you look at like the West really struggles with diabetes. Now, is that because we've got obviously our diet and everything else is awful in comparison to say a Japanese lifestyle. It just is. But do they have the same risk, or is it just the fact that they're mitigating that risk with a much better diet? And it's quite because obviously our diet's horrible, but we may have the same risk, but they just mitigate it better.
I think this is, and this moves into obesity as well, because you'll hear people go, oh, diabetes and obesity aren't genetic, they're all lifestyle. And actually, most chronic conditions are a combination of genetics and lifestyle. Now, our bodies have evolved in an environment where scarcity is important. So actually, think there's lots of genetic variants associated with overeating tendencies. Now, in this day and age where food is ubiquitous, this is highly problematic. But if you think about this is going to be a cliche, but in the savannah, if there was the presence of honey or tubers, like sort of potato, sort of derivative, sort of vegetable crops, when they're present, you want to overeat on them because you don't know when they're coming next. So there's an advantage to when having high sugar to repress appetite and keep eating, because you're going to store it as fat and that's going to help you survive. In the modern day, this is not very useful. So the same with diabetes, how your insulin response in particular, because again, insulin response is associated with fullness, which is associated with body composition, which over time, if you're constantly firing the system with too much food, processed food, high sugar food, high processed fat food, you are going to lead to chronic health conditions. And of course, evolution hasn't really paid much attention to chronic health because we've died of fighting infectious disease, everything else. So actually our bodies have evolved in a very different environment. So the genetic factors that lead certain people to overeat, to be more sensitive to sugars, to certain fats, actually a lot of them may have been beneficial. Not necessarily they were selected for, they may have just happened sporadically, but then have become expanded in the population. These are now driving the behaviors that lead to diabetes and to obesity. And of course, there are lots of people that have these bad diets, but there are smaller segments of them that lead to the diseases. And a lot of this is this genetic environment interaction. And this is, again,
we have to look at it. And I remember, I don't know whether you guys remember this, but can you remember the fat versus skinny program they used to have on TV? They used to get these. Obviously, they're having a look at the diets, and both of them were awful, and they were trying to encourage change. And quite often you'd find the person that was the skinny side, their diet was almost as bad in terms of eat. I mean, I can remember this guy, really skinny guy, and all he ate was Snickers bars.
Yeah.
It was just Snickers, breakfast, lunch, and dinners. So his diet was absolutely dreadful, but it never led to him being obese. Yet the lady that was on there with him, obviously very big, and she was just overeating. But when you looked at the actual content of their diet, it wasn't actually that much different. It was just one was eating a lot more of it than the other.
That
But it was
desire
really
to
interesting.
overeat.
Their diet was awful as well.
And that desire to overeat, if you look at all the genetic variants associated with obesity, they're not in your pancreas, they're not in your body fat, they're in your brain. They're behavioral. It's that desire. And you think about all you need to be doing is eating 100 to 200 calories more than you need to a day over 10 years to be morbidly obese. I hope I've done the
Wow.
mathematics right there, but yeah, I think I have. So it's not but you get this idea of people gravaging themselves on 10 McDonald's a day, but actually it's just that. And then so the genetics primes the system to overeat. Then when you get fat, you get what is considered or called epigenetic changes, where actually your gene expressions changes. You start to get leptin resistant, you start to get insulin resistant, which your brain then thinks you're not full, which means you're more likely to overeat. But a lot of the early drivers of people putting weight on is genetic, but then you get this cyclical feedback
Oh,
loop,
wow.
which then drives different people to have different outcomes. So the skinny guy would have been probably have high blood sugar, probably high cholesterol, and all these other things that would have led him to have earlier onset chronic diseases. So I think that's a very, very good example of how these things work. But it was just the hypercalorific nature of the obese person that just made them obese, and a lot of
Yeah,
that can be driven by their eating behaviors that can be extrapolated back to genetics.
that's crazy, isn't it? Now, obviously that the podcast flown by, but I do want to give you guys an opportunity in terms of, because one of the big things you guys are doing is working with gyms. Obviously, you work with individuals, but you're working with gyms. And in terms of what you guys do with those, obviously you're putting the programs in there, but how is it you guys are working with gyms, or how would you like to work with gyms to get this product more available throughout more clubs in the country? Because personally, I think every club in the country should have something like this in there, whether that be as a unique product that they sell, or whether that becomes part of their onboarding process. I mean, how brilliant would it be if clubs started having something like this as their onboarding process? The data you would have to then allow you to put in processes to improve health and well-being, and then also the data at the end to go, these are the outcomes, this is what we've achieved. I think it'd be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, Ryan. I mean, I think that was, as we were saying earlier, when we were doing direct to consumer, we had a lot of people coming to us and saying, I'd just like to speak to a person. And I guess what we are as a company, what we do very well, I believe, is the sort of assimilation of the data, the analysis, and the production of the results, which is the knowledge. That's the thing. These are your priorities. This is where we see your greatest risks. This is what you can do to mitigate those risks. So that's our role in this equation.
Yeah.
What we don't do, and what's a really critical part of the equation, of course, is the motivation to then follow through and to do those things. And that is where your gyms, where your personal trainers, are really critical. Like having that support to sort of sit down with someone and say, these are the things that you can do. These are your risks, and these are the things that you can do. Or this is the way in some cases, and again, it depends on the approach, because we have partners that work in different sort of categories. It might be around weight loss, it might be around sports performance, and looking at how you can get your best sort of 10K time or triathlon.
Well, we're speaking to your team a little bit later on this afternoon with a club that's opening up in Stoke in Henley. And he's a sports performance coach at the minute. So he's opening a gym, which is sports performance. He works with football clubs and so on. So I was like, right, we need to speak to you guys because it just makes sense right from the outset. It's and all the other testing that he does. I think it just fits in really well with that. But I also think it fits really nicely in a general gym. Just from a retention point of view, we all know that results leads to higher retention. The main reasons people leave are cleanliness at a club not being spoken to, and lack of results. Is generally the three reasons people leave. Now you can mitigate one of those straight off by having the results and going, actually, in order to achieve this, this is the data, this is what we're going to do. Also improves your onboarding because you've actually got something to work with someone on, rather than just a conversation. We go, what would you like to achieve? Okay, well, we're going to write a program to that. You've actually got data to say, actually, that's what you want to achieve. Your DNA profiling is saying this is how we're going to do it. And it makes you look amazing as a club. When we did it in fitness space, we looked incredible because no one else did it. We were giving these people results and going, this is how you're training. Your DNA says this is how you're training. And people were just blown away by that. And I just think from a sales perspective, it makes you stand out. From a retention perspective, it's incredible because you've got something to work to. And it's not just then a 2 to 3 month process where you're working with someone and going, okay, that's your program. Let's rewrite your program. You've got, like you say, you've got 180 points there to work on. So actually, we've nailed these. We've got you into a routine there. Right, we're going on to the next three and the next three, and we just keep working on those. So the long lifetime value of that membership just increases exponentially, and ultimately, then it pays for itself. So obviously, there's a cost to this, but it would pay for itself just by that extended membership.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you said, in terms of the partners we're working with, they're taking different approaches. So in some cases, they're drip feeding the information through, like you said, a report a week. Let's focus on this one, take the priorities. In some cases, they're delivering them as sort of, a one-off report, and then let's use that information to sort of develop your training going forward in your plans. And we're always releasing new information on the site as well. So as you said earlier, this is not, we have an in-house science team. We're always looking at the research. We can update the research as we get access to new information through the peer-reviewed literature. So we're releasing new reports all the time. So there's going to be new information coming in that you can deliver to that client and say, actually, we've got a really interesting report. You're in one of the kind of higher risk categories. Let's come in, sit down, have a talk about it. And it should just it's fundamental hygiene as I see it. It's like everybody should have access to this information at the beginning of their program, because it's the hygiene stuff. It's the understanding your predispositions, and then everything else makes sense in the context of that information. So blood testing, really important as well. But if you don't, I mean, there's been times where we've spoken to members where they've said, God, my doctor's been, doing these bloods. We've been really confused as to what it means or what's going on. And then I've got my genetic tests and something's come out and I've gone, that's it. That's the issue. And it all makes sense. So it puts into context a lot of the other information that people will have access to, and those sort of more what's the word I'm looking for, like where they're at today versus the genetics suggesting where their kind of greatest risks are in terms of what might happen in their future.
And the great thing is it doesn't change. Or
no,
I know there's a few
it's a
things
one-off test.
Smoothly.
Yeah, exactly. You do, and
that's what I mean.
our
Once you've got
disadvantage and your advantage.
You're not sort of going, okay, 6 months down the line, like bloods can change. I mean, I have bloods every 3 months almost from my chronic fatigue, and something new always appears, and we try to do something about it. But with genetics, it's there. At least then you can sort of go, actually, which ones do we focus? And you can take a long-term view on it. Then it doesn't have to, like Stuart was saying earlier, you don't have to sort of go, okay, we're going to deal with all these 180. Actually, I've got a predisposition to potentially Alzheimer's, something like that, but I'm in my 30s. So is it something to work on now, or is that something to work on in a few years' time? Let's focus on these other things first. But I just think as a club, as an individual, it's amazing data, and I think everybody should do it. But I think as well for clubbers and an industry as well, because the big argument at the minute is we can't get government support as an industry to support the NHS and everything else. One, they don't have the money, and secondly, they're not really keen on the data we produce. We don't really produce enough evidence to go, actually, come give us a few million quid so we can drive this and whatever. But when you've got data like yours, it says, okay, this is where we're at. We can now start putting interventions in there to solve these. It'd just be incredible to be able to go back to the government and go, actually, we've got 11 million people here. Half of those have this. This is what we're working on. This we can drive it forward. Give us some support, and we can drive. It just, the whole thing just fits in nicely. Obviously, we need to get 500,000 people to start taking the test, which is obviously where you're working on. But if you had that data and then you had the outcomes at the back of it as well that you're able to achieve, I just think that gives you so much more power when you're trying to get support from the likes of government departments and so on. So I think the work you guys are doing are incredible. And I know the science has moved on exponentially since even when I was selling it back in the day. So I look forward to where it's going next. Where do you think I mean, is there bigger breakthroughs coming through, or you guys at that stage now where you sort of we understand pretty much 90% of where we're at, or we're really at the start of this?
I think in terms of the track, the chap or one of the chaps that discovered DNA died this week.
Oh, did he? Oh, wow.
James Watson. So those big breakthroughs, i.e., discovery of DNA, I think we're going to have a few of those. But in terms of the understanding of how the data meshes together, so one thing we're working at the moment, and I've got a panel at the moment, is how can you use your genetics to interpret your blood data? I think Sam alluded to this because there's lots of variants that actually may mean what you're seeing in your bloods may not necessarily be giving you the right information. How do you then incorporate epigenetics and blood microbiome? There's still a lot of debate whether they're casual relationships, i.e. they're just associations versus causal relationships. All the integration of this omics data. Then, of course, because as you start to understand the mechanisms of each person's individual problem, then there's the solutions to them. And you can kind of see where people talk a lot about peptides at the moment, but you've got GLP-1 agonists and semaglutide and all that. You're going to start to see some more targeted solutions as you understand the complexity of someone's condition, but also the mechanism of it. So I think there's going to be a lot of more solutions coming up. And what we do is we'll just create that data bank. We'll keep improving our algorithms. Obviously AI is something that's talked about a lot. That I think not necessarily in the discovery component of what we do. It's a lot more machine learning and regression analysis. But in terms of how you communicate it to people, I think AI is going to take a forefront.
Absolutely. And just reading that data, isn't it? You can do it so much quicker and so much more effectively. So,
but I will push back, and you see this. We've kind of had a bit of a theme of Alzheimer's. Is the human connection is essential for long-term health. If you look at a lot of chronic health studies, it's social economic, it's friendships, it's marriages, it's relationships that are drivers of human health. We are a social species. The silicon bot is not going to take control on it. And I guess in terms of your industry, understanding the position of the human being in the gym. So I know there's probably a lot of fear in the industry as well, but actually everything I do can be replaced by a computer. No, it is the personal components. It's the motivation. It's the being there. It's the listening to that. So the therapeutic sort of interaction that's really important for the gyms as well. And just
what's amazing with it actually is, and you make a really valid point there. This actually gives the gym an ability to have more contact points. Because the hard thing, I've been in the industry 27 years now, and the hardest thing about it is once you have that initial contact, you build the rapport, you obviously write their program and let them go effectively, which most clubs will do. Getting them back, then you could have 100% sign up for that first one. You're lucky if you get 50 back for the renewal of that program and the chat, and that gets smaller and smaller as you go. Something like this, it gives you more opportunity to have those contact points with clients, and I think that you're right. We are a social species. If you read any of my posts on LinkedIn, a lot of it is around customer service. We're a hospitality industry. We're not you know what I mean? So I think as an industry, we fail to realize we work in hospitality. We seem to think that's the restaurants and hotels, but ultimately that's what we do. We interact with people. And so if you can give yourself an opportunity to interact even more, you can only help your business. You can only help it grow. Members will stay longer and you'll get better results. So when someone's looking at this and thinking it's a science thing, it may help. Actually, there's a lot more around it that this brings to a business rather than just the testing. And I think that's the important thing for people to understand.
So you're absolutely right. If you look in the younger generations now, the gym's becoming the new pub. You'll go to the gym and be 3, 4, 5 young people. We were chatting to David Lloyd yesterday of David Lloyd Gym fame, and he's very famous for actually creating clubs where you have
I
your
love his clubs.
yeah, where you go in, interact, you know, and he's got some other ideas that he's releasing that are taking this to a new level, and our product obviously integrates with the whole idea of this is not just a tick in a box. It's how you change your whole lifestyle, because the evidence around chronic health, as I said, is about your social, economic, your interactive process within your community. And gyms can be those community hubs. They're not just a thing where you go lift some bits of metal. They can become community hubs.
Oh, absolutely. My son's 20 now, and I mean, it's not necessarily the gym. He's a climber, but he'll do that 5 times a week, and most of his friends will train in some form or other. So, I think it's exciting because the younger population are seeing the value in health. It's older people like me that I'm lucky I work in the industry I do, but my age group, the sort of that 50s age group, is the one we've almost got to try and capture and bring back
Yes.
into the lifestyle change. One, they've been battered and bruised through life up to that point, and things have gone in the way and everything else. And I understand that. Obviously, the 20-year-olds haven't had that experiences yet, so they may turn into the same. But I'm hoping that this younger population, because of the value that they have for being healthy and the information they have, should hopefully drag that continuation forward with training a lot more than it probably has done in my generation. I think the
No,
drop off's quite huge in my generation. When people get to sort of that 35, 40, tends to drop off.
we
Um,
see in our direct to consumer purchasing at the 40 and 50 are two peaks, because it's
are
those
they?
midlife crises, those, you know, I'm
Yeah, we
Yeah,
thought there
yeah.
was an issue with the data. We were like,
yeah,
why are we getting these
yeah,
peaks?
yeah.
We worked
And
it
it
out.
makes
It's like
sense.
the birthday gift to yourself when you hit a
Yeah,
milestone and you go, oh, things
Like
are,
buying the motorbike, isn't it? Yeah, well,
yeah.
yeah.
I buy a DNA kit and and a motorbike. There we go. One
Yeah,
have
yeah,
saved me, one
yeah.
have killed me.
One definitely reduces your health,
Well, your chance of,
statistically
yeah,
speaking. Yeah, yeah.
statistically speaking.
But on that's quite a glib thing to say. But actually, having an identity and something to be excited about is very important in life, be it motorbikes or anything else. So,
Yeah, very
uh,
true. Very true. I think the one thing I'd add, Ryan, just to add my two pennies to the I think when we're looking ahead, and I think this is one of those things when they say, what will you look differently back on in sort of 100 years' time, and what will we just think, wow, that was just crazy that we did things that way. And I think that the lack of tailoring, like the fact that we don't have any level of personalization in whether we look at kind of whatever we call healthcare, whether that's the kind of NHS level stuff where it's more about treatments of disease as we kind of recognize now, or the preventative health side of things, which I feel falls more comfortably within that gym and fitness space. The fact that we don't tailor interventions to the individual, I think people will look back and go, wow, that was crazy. We just treated everyone the same, even though everybody is obviously biologically unique. And hopefully now we're starting to get the tools, we're getting the familiarity with what these tools can actually do and how they work together. And I think that's really important, because sometimes, and we spoke about this sort of offline a little earlier, it can almost become a competition between, is this technology better than that? Or that one's rubbish and this is the one that everybody should be going with. And I think the reality is, and I know this is not a very sexy answer in this day and age of where everything has to be polarized, but it is about, it's about the balance. It's about understanding how everything fits together. So genetics is really important, but then so is gut health, so is blood testing, so are the other sort of biometric data that we can look at and collect as well. So are potentially, your wearable devices and the data that we can collect through those. You've got to look at everything together. And I guess that's what we're trying to do at Fitness Genes. We're trying to pull in, we started with genetics, but now we're pulling in the blood data. We're starting to pull in the wearable data. That will be the next step for us. Like, how can we bring it all together into one solution, which gives you an answer at the end of
I
it?
think that's the key, isn't it? Because it's so scientific, and a lot of this, even the data you get on your wearables, you can look at it and go, well, what does that mean? You know what I mean? My resting heart rate is, well, most people won't understand that, and so it's great to have it on your wrist. I don't even wear it anymore. Um,
Still
it
got mine.
sits next to me over there. But most people don't know how to interpret that data, and I think that's the key. Businesses like yours are taking all that information and go, actually, here's the usable information that you can do. Because if you were just to give me those 180 reports and say work it out, it would almost go, well, that's clever, but I don't know what to do with that. And what you guys are doing is taking all that information and going, this is what you do with it. So these are your solutions. Go away and deal with it. And I think, like I say, if you're bringing the blood testing and the wearables and everything, and you're able to combine all that together, it'll be an incredible tool. Not just for clubs and trainers, but for individuals who are training as well, to actually understand who they are and how to impact their health. So it is really exciting. That's why I was super excited to have you guys on, because I think it's an amazing subject. And I think more people need to get out there and understand themselves. I think that's the key. I think that's a good place to leave it. I really appreciate you guys' time. If anybody wants any information, all your details will be at the beginning and the end of the podcast. Pick it up. Obviously, both of you guys are on LinkedIn as well, so they can grab you there, or obviously go to your website. But I really appreciate your time this morning, guys. It's been fascinating. So we'll obviously have to get you on again once you get the wearable stuff up and running. We'll get you back on, and you can see how you're linking it all together.
Fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Cheers for that, guys. I'll like I say, I'll edit that tonight, and we'll pop it out tomorrow, and I'll send you the stuff. If there's anything, I mean, how can I help get you out there? I guess is the thing. I mean, obviously as a consultant, we speak to a lot of different companies. So if you need any contacts, if you've got something, you go, right, you know anyone who works at, just drop me a message. I'm more than happy to do you an e-meet to those guys. So if there's any of the franchises, you know, any type fitness, Jets, Energy, people like that, we know all the CEOs and stuff of those guys. So and then I'm more than happy to, once the podcast goes out, we'll give it a week or so, and if you send me something that I can put out on LinkedIn and my socials, I'll bang that out as well for you.